Okay, so we're going to start. I actually want to have one of the students that will be introducing you, and then we'll open up the floor to you, and then we'll open it up for the question and answer from the students. So, Sia, if you'd like to start.
Okay. Hi, and thank you all for joining us today, especially since this is finals week. My name is Sia Singh. I'm a part of the Student Internship Network. We're working with the Irvington High School PTSA to coordinate this series of career readiness sessions for the benefit of all Irvington High School students. To join this committee or help with this series, please email Rocky, the Vice President of Programs for Irvington High School PTSA, at programs.ptsa.irvington@gmail.com. I'm very happy to be able to introduce our wonderful guest speaker for today. Miss Pamela Price was raised in Cincinnati, Ohio. She joined the civil rights movement when she was 13 years old, when she was about my age. She is a survivor of the Ohio juvenile justice and foster care systems. She graduated from Yale University with a BA in political science in 1978. After Yale, Miss Price attended the Berkeley School of Law, Boalt Hall, where she received her JD and a master's degree in jurisprudence and social policy in 1982. She started her professional legal career as a criminal defense attorney at the Bayview Hunters Point Community Defender's Office in San Francisco. Her first trial was a felony robbery based on a mistaken identity, and she won an acquittal for her client. As a community defender, she handled hundreds of misdemeanor and felony cases and often represented young people caught up in the criminal justice system at San Francisco's infamous Youth Guidance Center. She left the community defender's office to start a private practice in Oakland, California. Following years of training working for small firms, Ms. Price started her own firm in 1991. Over the next 30 years, she represented everyday people in state and federal courts and became a nationally recognized civil rights attorney. Specializing in employment litigation, Ms. Price represented countless victims of retaliation, wrongful termination, sexual assault, sex, age, religion, disability, and race-based discrimination. Every year since 2004, Ms. Price has been named one of the top 5% of Northern California super lawyers by San Francisco Magazine. Over the past few months, she fought a hard battle to win the role of top prosecutor for Alameda County. In January, Ms. Price will be our new district attorney for Alameda County. Congratulations, Ms. Price, and thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We request Ms. Price to please share some insights, thoughts, and advice for all of us as we move on through high school to the next phase in our life, college and beyond. We will take questions after Ms. Price's talk. Ms. Price, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I see we got a good collection of folks here, and it's my honor to be able to share with you some thoughts about the journey that has brought me to the point where I am going to be the first Black female district attorney of Alameda County. I will be the fourth Black woman in the state of California to hold that seat out of 58 counties where we have district attorneys. And across the country, there are literally thousands of district attorneys everywhere. And we can talk more about the role of the district attorney and the responsibilities and my platform, what I intend to do as your next district attorney. But I thought I'd share my journey first, starting from Cincinnati, Ohio, and in 3 phases. I'm going to talk first about the period of time as an adolescent when I was your age and had to overcome the challenges of being in foster care and being tossed around in a world of great turmoil. The civil rights era of the 1960s and the 1970s was a great change, a lot of change in our country, and a lot of young people were on the forefront of that, and I happen to have gotten caught up in that. And then the opportunity to get my education at Yale and UC Berkeley, and to learn ultimately what drove me to become a lawyer, and then the practice of law, which is where I am now and about to change and make this transition from being in a private law firm to joining the district attorney's office. So I'm going to share all of that with you and be happy to answer your questions about this. I am from Cincinnati, Ohio, and on April 4th, 1968, when Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee, my entire world changed. I tell people I was both traumatized and radicalized in one moment. because I was 11 years old and I could not stop crying because I could not understand how someone who believed in love and justice and mercy and just was fighting for people's basic civil rights, why he would be killed, but he was. And I couldn't process it. And I, like many, many people across this country, became extremely angry. I got involved in the civil rights movement. I got arrested in a civil rights demonstration by the time I was 13 years old, and I got tracked into the juvenile justice and the foster care system. And I literally made it from the streets of Cincinnati to Yale College by the grace of God, because I was a throwaway kid that nobody thought was going to be anything. I was shuffled between juvenile hall and foster homes. My last year of high school, I dropped out of high school because I walked away from foster care when I was 16 years old, and I couldn't figure out how to go to school and pay my rent and work my jobs. And so I decided I would let school go, right? Very foolish decision. Let me say that very clearly, foolish decision. But I was young and dumb and made a lot of bad choices and made a lot of mistakes. And one of the things that I tell people now is that Brian Stevenson says none of us want to be judged by the worst thing we've ever done in our lives. Brian Stevenson represents young people on death row. He's the founder of the Equal Justice Institute in Alabama, and he fights every day for the rights of young people to have a second chance, to be free from the criminal justice system. And so when I heard him say that, I understood that. Most of people that you will meet in life, the worst thing they ever did in their life was before they turned 18. And so I tell folks, never give up on a kid, because you don't know where that child's going to come or where that child is going to go. No one expected that I would become a civil rights lawyer, that I would argue before the United States Supreme Court, that I would become the district attorney, and it all goes back to no one thought I would graduate from high school. And so for young people, I try to say to you that whatever you're going through in this time that we call adolescence, where you're becoming a person, your own person, it's hard because you are old enough to make your own decisions and make all the bad choices that you choose to make. And you do so without understanding that where you are right now is only a moment in time, and that moment is going to pass. And then there will be other moments in time. And that if you're lucky, you're going to grow and develop and change. And someone asked me today, did you know you were going to be a lawyer? No, I had no idea. Did you know what you were going to do? No, I did not. When I left Cincinnati, Ohio to go to Yale, I had no idea what I wanted to be. When I was going to Yale, I still was trying to find myself. But the one thing that my foster moms taught me was get your education. That's the one thing that no one can take from you. And so I could hear that message, and it resonated with me, and it stayed with me, and it propelled me to keep trying to get my education. And by the grace of God, I got it. I was able to get into Yale on a full scholarship. I was able to graduate from Yale and then come to California and go to UC Berkeley Law School. And so there's a great value of education in life if you are inclined to follow that path. It opens doors. It is a game changer. And one of the things that I understand in this season of my life when I am fighting to protect the democracy is that we need people who are educated. Maybe you don't go to college, but you can educate yourself. You must educate yourself about what is happening in the world, because it is only educated people who will protect our democracy. And that's so critical. And it gives you the capacity to think for yourself. So fast forward, I come to California. I go to UC Berkeley. I got a great education at UC Berkeley. I took the California bar and I started practicing law. I started off doing criminal cases. I was very dismayed by the manner in which the criminal system operates, how it operated then and now. And so I ultimately decided I wanted to do civil litigation. So I became a civil rights attorney, doing big cases, little cases. Yes, I've been to the United States Supreme Court. I've been to, courts in Amador County, to Marin and Solano. I've traveled the state and done cases, big cases and little cases, in state courts and federal courts, just fighting for everyday people. And one of the things that I always commended and applauded and honored my clients for was that they were people who would stand up for what was right, even when they were standing alone. And sometimes when you are standing up for what is right, you will find yourself standing alone. It will feel like you're standing alone. In 1977, I joined the first sexual harassment lawsuit under Title IX. It's a little case called Alexander versus Yale. And I ended up being the only plaintiff in that lawsuit whose name was on there, who had to go to trial, who had to go through the process. And all eyes were on me, but I was standing up for what was right. And fortunately, I wasn't standing alone. So you need to know that when it feels like you're standing alone, you're not. That there are people all over the world, whether they live in your community or the next community or the next city or the next state or the next town, all across the world, there are people who believe in the goodness of people, in the right for people to be safe and to live their lives, and for each of us to be able to fulfill our potential. And that's the fundamental human right. And people are willing to fight for that. And so I've been blessed to represent everyday people who were willing to fight for their rights and for the rights of others. I've represented victims of sexual assault. I've represented victims of race discrimination, of retaliation, of religious discrimination, gone up and down the state. And most of the time, the people who I represented wanted to hold the person who harmed them accountable. They also wanted to make sure that it would not happen, that what happened to them would not happen to someone else. And that is an incredible contribution to the whole community. When someone is willing to stand up and say, this is wrong, it happened to me, and I don't want it to happen to anyone else. And so that's what I've been doing for 30 years, using the great education I got, using the skills I got. I will tell you, it took 10 years for me to really become, a first-class lawyer. It takes that long. And so everything that you do will take time. It will take time and patience till you get it right, until you're at a point where you have mastered your craft. And whatever you do, you want to try to master the craft so that the service that you provide in whatever arena you provided is the best service that you can provide. So that's my story. I decided to run for district attorney in 2017 because the racial disparities were outrageous to me, and because prosecutors have forgotten that their mission is to protect public safety by advancing justice. Alameda County lacks a justice system. Our justice system is broken, and everyone knows it. And so my job as your next district attorney over the next 6 years is to try to fix this broken system, and certainly to make sure that young people like yourselves are safe, that you have the right to thrive and to grow and to protest, because all progress depends on the unreasonable man or woman, for that matter. So don't ever be afraid to question or to lift your voice and to say something is wrong, or to ask, why is it like this? Because just because it's always been that way doesn't mean that's how it's supposed to be. Most of the time it's not. Nelson Mandela is famous for saying everything seems impossible until it's done. So that's what I'll end with, and I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. It was very inspiring. I mean, and if you think about like high school is probably one of the hardest times in a person's life because there's so much uncertainty. And I think a lot of these kids are trying to figure out, where they're going to be, and they feel like they have to have it all. Sorry, my light went off. They have they have to have it all figured out by the time they apply to college. And your story is amazing. It's very inspiring that where you were and where you are today. I guess the first question that came, and I'll just tell anyone who has questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can send them to me, or you just raise your hand and we can call on you so you can ask the questions. But the first question I have is that, you've done so much in your life, and now you're about to embark on something that's completely it's different than what you've done in a way, right? Because you've been on the other side, and now you're going to be on the prosecution side. What is the thing that you're most anticipating, and what do you expect to be the hardest part of this new phase of your life?
The part that I think will be the hardest is getting people to commit to a new vision of justice. In our criminal justice system for decades, and I'm the first person to run for this seat from outside the office since 1976. And we have had the same people running the office by the same playbook since 1939. And in our country, we have had a very limited, what we call a very limited menu of justice. You either go home or you go to jail, and there's no in between, right? And usually if you go to jail for a long, long time. And that was the menu. It's like going into a restaurant and they only have two things on the menu. My task will be to add real meaningful choices to that menu, and getting the people who are used to only picking one or two to be able to understand that there's a range of options and how best to implement that. Because I understand the people I'm working with who get to make those decisions are lawyers. And some of them have been lawyers for a very long time. And change is hard for people. They want to be able to do things the way we've always done it. And so our challenge is to get people to understand that there is more than two choices, that at least some of those choices are far more effective than what we've been doing, and that's not necessarily an indictment of you personally. It's just a change in the system that we have. So I'm looking forward to it because it allows me and my team to be creative. In fact, it allows the whole community to be creative about how we administer justice.
Awesome. So, and then the second question I've gotten is that, given all the things that you've experienced and all the things that you have accomplished, what's probably been the hardest thing that you've done in your life?
A lot of hard stuff. A lot of hard stuff. I would say the hardest thing that I recall is when I was suing Pelican Bay State Prison. And as a small firm owner and lawyer, I had a team of lawyers, but when you're in business for yourself, everything ultimately falls on you, whether you pay the mortgage or the rent, whether you pay the janitor, whether you are the janitor, whether the copier breaks down and you got somebody to fix it, everything falls on you. And in the midst of that, I did a case on behalf of a female officer who worked at Pelican Bay. And she literally drove from Crescent City. For those who don't know, that's our supermax prison. And it's at the very top of the state of California in a place called Crescent City, California. And it's about 7-8 hours drive from here. And she drove into my office. She drove from Crescent City to Oakland and told me what had happened to her. And it was very scary. There were a lot of bad things going on up there. And literally when she left our office, my associate and I looked at each other, and he asked me, "Do you think we'll ever see this woman alive again?" And I said, "I don't know." I mean, that's how serious it was. We took the case, and for 3 years, we fought the case, and it was hard. Um, and for me, it was physically taxing, not only because I was running a business and had a bunch of other cases, but I used to have to drive from Oakland to Crescent City to be able to to take depositions and do the things that needed to be done there. And it really took me out of my comfort zone for about 3 years. It was really hard. But we won, so it worked out well.
It's awesome. So the second, Sia, you had a question?
Yeah. So what's a day in a lawyer's life like?
Zoom, Zoom, and Zoom, and Zoom. I'm Zooming sometimes 4 or 5 hours a day. I'm on the computer. I have 3 screens on my desk, and I have papers. I might be writing a brief. I might be answering some what we call discovery questions. I'm talking to clients. I'm talking to defense counsel. I'm looking for court orders and trying to comply with them. When you're a lawyer, there's a lot, depending on what your practice is, there can be a lot of different things coming at you all at once. And you just have to juggle them. A day in the life of a litigation lawyer means you have at least 5 balls in the air, that you toss them up in the morning, you hold them up all day long, you juggle them, and you hope, by 7, 8 o'clock at night, you've managed to catch that ball, put it into place, catch that ball, put it into place, catching balls and putting them where they belong.
Because you have deadlines, right? I mean, you have to make sure you don't miss anything, and
Right.
there's so many nuances and stuff. Yeah, and so can you speak to, I know that you've had a lot of experience in the employment side, in the sexual harassment and things like that, and as well as I know you've defended. I think I read about one of your cases where you defended a murder victim, someone who was accused of murder, and you were able to get them acquitted, so. In all of these areas of law, which has been the area of law that you've enjoyed the most?
Okay. Yeah, my case was, it was a robbery. He didn't murder anyone. It was a robbery. And he was walking down the street, and the police rolled up on him and said, "You must have done this," and put him in custody. And it was very harrowing, mistaken identity. I would say I enjoy the criminal law. Well, I enjoy all of it. I'm a trial lawyer, so the part that I love the most is being in the courtroom. And so I think as a civil rights lawyer, I have prosecuted cases in the civil system. And that to me has been as powerful as being a prosecutor in the criminal system. Because in the civil system, you are going up against corporations or government entities that are well funded. It is a very much of a David versus Goliath type of practice. And you have to be the one that is literally standing in the gap for people. And I love that. And to be able to talk to a jury and explain to them what happened to my client, why it was wrong, how they suffered, and how they should be compensated is really, very satisfying and fulfilling for me.
So we actually have, there's now people I think are putting them out in public. Otherwise, they were being sent to me directly. So we'll start with Gopi Krishna. Gopi Krishna, you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah. I'm actually on my dad's computer right now, but
okay.
I was wondering, what do you think are the most important qualities that a lawyer should possess, Ms. Price?
Compassion for people, an ability, patience, because you have to be able to listen to what people need to tell you and really listen, and which requires patience because you really have to listen to what it is they're telling you and what they're not telling you, what they want you to hear, to really, really hear and be able to take it to heart, and have compassion and empathy for where they are. And at the and still at the same time, you have to be able, to really be comfortable in who you are, because in order to help someone, it takes tremendous strength. It really does. One of my mentors taught me, because I take people's pain. You can take on pain as a lawyer. And my mentor taught me early on, think of yourself as the doctor and somebody comes to you and you have to do surgery. You can't get if they're in horrible pain, if you're the surgeon, you cannot get on the gurney with them, right? You can't get in the bed with them because then they will die, right? And because you did not do your job. So remembering that as much compassion and empathy as I have for people, that I also have a job to do, and that they came to me to do a job, not to get into bed with them, not to fall apart with them as much as they want me to. That's not my job. My job is to guide them through the legal system. So you have to have a sense of yourself and remembering who you are and what your responsibility is.
Thank you for that answer.
So there's a couple more questions. One is, how do you think high school students can play a part in the justice system?
I think high school students have a very important role to hold the justice system accountable. One of the challenges, the greatest challenges that we have in Alameda County is how we have demonized young people and over-criminalized young people, particularly Black and Brown children in this county have just been horribly, horribly over-criminalized. And that has been okay for decades now. The statistic that I often cited in the last 2 years is that between 2010 and 2016, a Black child was 65 times more likely to be charged as an adult than a white child. And a Latino child was 27 times more likely to be charged as an adult than a white child. And unless young people raise their voices and say how you are treating us, how you are judging us is unacceptable, it will continue to go the way it has. And we've been fortunate in Alameda County to have a number of activists, youth organizations, whether it's Youth Alive dealing with gun violence, whether it's Courage or Urban Peace Movement. These are the young people that have driven the reforms that we've seen in the criminal justice system in Alameda County. So you all play an incredibly important role.
Is there any, so I think these are Youth Alive, are these organizations that are there? Are there any other organizations or entities that they could possibly volunteer with, or lawyers or whatever, that they can kind of get experiences? It can give them a better perspective on how they can move forward or how they can make a decision for their lives.
Sure. There's Genesis in the Tri-Valley area. There's the Center for Young Women's Development, which operates out of Oakland, but operates all over the county. I remember a few years ago when a young woman's body was found at the BART station. It was the Center for Young Women's Development that led the protests and got us all to show up at the BART station in the middle of the night. And we did a 2-mile march from the jail to the BART station to show people how dangerous that situation is, particularly for young women. We have the Youth Law Center here and the National Center for Youth Law. So there's Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth. There are so many organizations that are active and engaging young people across this county, really.
And then there's, I think, I know a lot of kids are sending them to me directly. You're definitely welcome to raise your hand and ask them yourself as well if you'd like to do that. But this is fine too. The question is, what is one thing a future lawyer must know before making the final push or decision to become a lawyer?
I think there's no one thing. I mean, as I've mentored young lawyers over the decades, I've always told them for every person, different kind of person, that's a different kind of lawyer. This is one of the beautiful things about the law. There is no mold. There is no rigid thing that says you have to be this or you have to do that. And for every person, you can decide, do I want to do this kind of law or that kind of law? Do I want to be a probate lawyer or a family law lawyer or a criminal lawyer or a real estate lawyer or a defense lawyer or a prosecutor? There are so many different areas of the law that are open to you when you decide to become a lawyer. Deciding to become a lawyer just means that you think maybe there's something in the law that you can do or that you can use. I decided to go to law school because I wanted to teach law. I thought I would be a law professor. And that was my path until I stepped into a courtroom, and then that became my path. And so it's the field is so wide open that if you just start on the path, you'll likely find your way.
That's great advice, actually, because I think you said it earlier that, when you when you were graduating, going to Yale, you had no idea what you were going to do, right? And you end up at Berkeley Law, and then it's like things just kind of kept opening. The doors open only when you start walking.
Yeah.
So that's I think that's I see it quite often that kids think they have to have it all figured out today. I mean, none of us are ever find that situation is there. We're always learning and moving forward. So the next question was, we often hear that studying law requires perseverance over many years. How would you suggest we stay focused, and especially given what you said earlier about how a typical, especially in smaller firms, busy attorneys are constantly juggling so many things. How do you stay focused to make sure that that you can do justice, or that you can move forward for a particular client?
So as a lawyer, you need a case management system which tells you when your deadlines are. That's the most common cause of legal malpractice, is missing a deadline. And so you've got to have a really efficient, effective case management system that you will pay attention to, because it is on you to pay attention to the notifications and to create the kinds of notifications that will trigger you to do something. Lawyers are procrastinators just like everybody else, which is why we often end up working late nights, and you'll hear about lawyers doing all-nighters because we procrastinated. And but you also learn as a lawyer that you have to plan ahead, and you have to be able to forecast, when am I going to get this done? How am I going to get it done? And you learn that over time by it's called case management, which means that you're taking a case from the beginning and you're moving it forward, and you learn the steps that you must take. And like I say, it actually takes about 10 years to really be a master of that. Ahead of time, just getting into the field, it does require that first 3 years. Law school is very, 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 very challenging. Okay. Law school is not fun. It was not fun for me. I don't know anybody who enjoyed law school. Okay. It's so much reading. It requires you to just give up your whole life and just be focused. You got to put your head down and read everything and study and think and be focused. And you don't have time for relationships, you don't have time for games and fun. And I feel like there are points in my life where things happen in terms of music and celebrities and things I have no knowledge about because I was in law school. I missed that whole thing. Okay. So there's going to be that period of your life, you're going to miss a whole lot because you're going to go essentially into lockdown for 3.5 years. But when you come out, you're going to be on the better side of it, and then you'll have the rest of your life. Law has longevity. I know people who are 85, 90 years old still practicing law.
There's a question, I think you've answered this, but I'll ask it again. What is the hardest, most taxing part of being a lawyer?
The work is not always easy. I would say there's something called, and it's not hard, it just depends on what you like and what you don't like. Some lawyers like answering questions and putting together documents and preparing paper. Others just want to be in a courtroom, okay? And they don't want to do any paperwork. Some lawyers love to write briefs. And then others, it's painful to have to write a brief. So it just depends. It's your personality and what you like to do. If you like to read and write, then you might become an appellate lawyer and just love it. If you like being in a courtroom, you'll have to hire an appellate lawyer because you're never going to write, right? It just depends.
Actually, I think Gopika, I know that's your dad's account, but he asked another question. What is the quality that I should build as a high school student that can help me in the future as a lawyer?
Mm-hmm. Build the ability to process a lot of information, because as a lawyer, you have to be able to process a lot of information quickly. And that means both in terms of what people are telling you verbally, what you're observing in going through documents. You have to be able to go through documents. You may not have time to read them. You may just be in a situation where you have to quickly skim them and identify what you're looking for, and see it and find it. Investigative skills are very good, which means you have to be able to deduce and kind of follow information and be very logical. And, just being able to read and make yourself focus on reading through a lot of information, because we have to read transcripts, we have to read briefs, we have to read cases. There's just a lot.
Oh, sorry, that was Yamini. Now two other questions. One is there a case that you took that after taking it, you completely regretted taking, and what did you do?
Oh, that has happened many times, unfortunately. Many times. And what I did depended on what the case was. So there was one case that I regretted taking, but I took it, and I had to pay for my mistake. And it wasn't a mistake when I took it. Looking back, it was, but it was a racial discrimination case, and the facts were that this young man had started at UC San Francisco as a young person, like 18, 19 years old, and that had been his only job, and he was 30 years old. He had a wife and a disabled child, and he had a good work record, and then his boss recommended him for promotion, and his boss's boss refused to promote him. And so he filed a complaint of race discrimination because he didn't understand why he couldn't be promoted. And then he became the victim of retaliation. And so I took that case because I believed that we could prove race and retaliation. But it became clear as we got closer to trial that we weren't going to be able to prove that. And I could not get the university to settle the case. And it became clear that if we did not win the case, that they were going to fire him. They were going to fire him. And so I was caught because I didn't think I could win the case, but I also knew that I had to take the chance, because if I didn't, they were going to fire him. And he was the sole provider for his wife and child, and his insurance, the child's health insurance, was through the university because it was at the medical center. And it was very hard. I could not settle the case. We ended up trying the case and losing the case. And then they fired him. And then he filed bankruptcy and we didn't get paid. Oh, it was a bad experience all the way around. It happens.
Yeah. So the next question is, how were you as a child?
Very difficult.
Were you
very difficult? Hard-headed. Okay, my mother said, you are so hard-headed. Very questioning of authority, of the way the world is. My favorite thing was, that's not fair. And my mother would say, life is not fair. You have to get over it. But I was always saying, that's not fair. That's not fair. So I had a good sense of fairness, and the world is not fair. So I was very uncomfortable as a child.
Suhani, there's one question here. I'm not sure anyone here has taken the LSAT, but the question is, if one does not do good on their LSAT, should they change professions?
No, take it again.
Yeah.
Just take it again. And the LSAT is not the ultimate determiner, trust me, of whether or not you're going to be a good lawyer. Not at all.
And what about in academics, right? So in academics, do you think there's any particular class or course or field of study that they should do in high school that would help better prepare them for law school and for beyond?
Two things. One is drama. I was not a drama major. I went to Yale to go to the Yale Drama School because I was in drama club and classes and plays in high school. Being a drama student is very, very helpful when you become a trial lawyer. You think about the presentation of the evidence as if it were a play. And so if you're trained in that way, that's very helpful. The other training that I think is helpful in high school is English, being able to really, appreciate and to benefit from training in English, which is both writing and reading.
And Suhani actually had a follow-up question. She said, since we've talked about why being a lawyer is good, what are some downsides of being a lawyer?
The work is hard sometimes, late nights, a lot of late nights sometimes. It's hard on your family. Lawyers are notorious for getting divorces. And, not spending as much time as we like with our children, because it's a sacrificial profession. And so if you go into this, you're willing to sacrifice yourself, but you don't always keep sight of the sacrifices that others are making in your life for you to be able to be a lawyer. So it's really hard to have a normal life when you are a lawyer, because there's a lot of work and a lot of responsibility. And it's easy to get just we tend to be A-type personalities and very focused. I mean, even now, my partner tells me if I'm in the lab, which he calls my office, he leaves me alone because I'm in my own little world trying to finish that brief or finish that case or I want to finish everything before I go do anything else. And, life is not always perfect like that.
No, it's really great. I mean, I think that a lot of these kids, like I said, they're trying to figure out what, kind of where they need to go or what they should be doing or what they should, and actually a point you made earlier about one little thing, it's just one moment of time, right? Things are going to change. And I think that that's a good lesson for a lot of these kids. So, what do you have any, as our final question, do you have any last minute advice or for their lives in general? Maybe not necessarily for law, but just their lives in general.
Yeah, I want to follow up on what you said. Everything that you're going through as a young person is just a moment in time. And it can feel very isolating or very like overwhelming. Like, this is it. This is my whole life is determined by where I'm at right now. And nothing is further from the truth. And so I think it's so important for young people to reach out to mentors, to realize that other people have gone through what you've gone through, that other people have gone along the path, and that they have something that they can share with you, and that you can reach out, hold on, find someone to hold on to, okay, who's willing to hold on to you, because that's what got me through, was knowing that there were people who were willing to hold on to me, even when I was, didn't feel like I was worth holding on to, and didn't have that kind of reinforcement that I was going to be this great lawyer. That, there were some people that were willing to invest in me, and I didn't always like what they had to say, but, I had to take the good with the bad. I had to listen to them fuss at me, but knowing that they meant the best for me. And so reach out, make sure you hold on to someone, because life is hard, and you all are going through a season, a period of time in our history when it is very overwhelming, no matter what your age. But particularly as a young person, there's so much uncertainty, there's so much change in our institutions and our systems. There's so much that we have to contend with, whether it's, having too much violence in our communities and in our world, and climate change. There's so many things that are destabilizing. So don't take it all on yourself, and don't feel like you are alone, because you're not. There's always somebody who cares about you. I'll leave you with a story about one of my grandsons, and he was wanting to go into the military because he didn't know what he wanted to do. And I was petrified, and I just prayed and prayed. And one day he went and he tried to get in, and he came back and he said, he calls me Auntie Amma, and he said, Auntie Amma, they rejected me. They wouldn't let me go in. And I said, that's because your grandmother was praying for you. Okay. So just know somebody's out there praying for you. And if you can find them, hold on to them.
Well, it's a good, I think that a lot of what you've said, if I had to summarize it, it's the idea that, hardships only make you stronger, right? And everything comes down to your perception of it, right? There's always some reason for why things happen in the direction that you take, and that you have to start walking in order for doors to open. So thank you so much, Pamela. I really appreciate you being here and talking to the kids of Irvington. And I wish you the very, very best in the next 6 years as district attorney of Alameda County. So
thank you. And thank you for your work with these young people. This is awesome. And I will say to you young people, I made it because of my teachers, my English teacher, my drama teacher, that they kept watching out for me, and they kept hoping for me. I'm sure they prayed for me too, but they kept thinking that I could make it. And they had faith and hope for me when I didn't have it for myself. So having a great teacher is truly a gift in life. So appreciate it and take advantage of it.
So, guys, thank you so much.
Okay, dear. Thank you. You all take care. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.